There was nowhere to go but up from here. Or all the way down. Yeah, guess that works too. Alright, I think it's finally time for me to play Pikmin 2. I waited long enough, but the original game was an absolute delight, so I'm excited to see what the sequel has in store. Weird. What the hell's all that noise? Huh. Somebody really pissed those guys off. Oh, f***, that somebody was me! Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk, and don't mind me, I'm just seeking refuge in this random-ass cave. It's great. Yeah, apparently I upset some members of the Pikmin community with something I said about Pikmin 2. But I haven't even played Pikmin 2. I was about to, before harassment kicked down my door. I don't get why everybody's so upset with me. And the worst part is, all this cave has is this random-ass piece of paper. I would read it, but I don't want to be rude to whoever lived here before me. F it, I'm so bored. Let's do this! Oh, for the love of God, how could I? I don't even have a way of playing the game right now. Oh, never mind, this cave has a Wii. You sadistic sons of bitches, I didn't want to play the Wii version! So turns out this cave does have more than just this piece of paper. It also has spiders. Are you guys friendly or am I in danger? What do you do if your son is a commercial failure but did well critically? Have another 3 years later! Pikmin 2, released for the Nintendo GameCube on April 29th, 2004, and was a follow-up to the GameCube launch title. That original game was an absolute treat, and most people who played it agreed. The game received fairly high scores across the board, and has cultivated a dedicated community of fans. This game sold less than Ratatouille the video game. Pikmin was a fairly niche title. After Miyamoto revealed at E3 2001 that he got the idea of the game from gardening, the world did not take notice. Also, there was quite a bit of competition around the time of its release. Not only did the GameCube have Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Smash Bros. Melee, just to name a few, but newcomer Microsoft's Xbox also had its killer title, Halo. And there was also third-party games like Final Fantasy X and Grand Theft Auto 3. Stacked up against all of these titles, Pikmin didn't really stand a chance. But Pikmin was Miyamoto's baby. Sure, he created Mario and Zelda, but those franchises were no longer overseen by him at this point. He was usually still a producer on most titles, but on the whole, those series ended up being helmed by other people at Nintendo, most notably Eiji Aonuma for The Legend of Zelda. But Pikmin, on the other hand, was helmed by Mr. Miyamoto. He was the franchise lead, and even if the first game didn't do too well commercially, it seemed that the game meant far too much to him to just give up on it. So, wanna know what he did? I thought he became an alcoholic. This game is up there in terms of how many copies I own of it. Naturally, I own both the original GameCube release and the Wii re-release. No surprise there. But I bought my GameCube copy on eBay, and yeah, it didn't work. So I bought a second GameCube copy that did work. But I don't even get to play that version because I'm in this dumb cave. Life stinks! Pikmin 2 picks up right where the first game ended, which is honestly weird to say with a Nintendo game. Even when games are direct follow-ups, they still seem to completely disregard the story of the previous entry. See? Super Mario Galaxy 2. But hey, Pikmin 2 bucks the trend. And we start off with Olimar returning to Hocotate after our adventures on PNF 404, only to find out that the company he works for, Hocotate Freight, is going under. They're completely bankrupt, and looking at their workforce, it's easy to see why. But fear not, because Olimar is here, with a bottle cap that he wanted to give to his son. Right. Yeah, I forgot this guy had f***ed. Turns out, though, this bottle cap is worth 100 Pokos, the national currency of Hocotate. And we find this out because this here traffic cone sucks it up without even asking Olimar. Because damn it, his job is more important than his kid. Work-life balance is for
sees.
The president over here decides that despite the fact that Olimar returned home mere minutes ago and has not seen any of his loved ones yet, he must return to PNF 404 to see if there are any more valuable treasures that can be used to repay the company's debt.
What did I tell ya?
If it makes you feel better, Olimar, you won't be alone on this journey. You'll be stuck with this dolt. So Olimar takes off with his new sidekick Louie, and on their descent to the planet, Olimar everything up. I'll give him this, he's consistent. The two captains are separated, and this is where we get into the gameplay of Pikmin 2. Now, Pikmin 2, brace yourselves, plays exactly like the first game, but with a few key differences. The main difference being this guy. You control both of the captains here, and switch between them at a moment's notice. Which, honest to God, as small of a change as this seems, it completely changes the way you approach this game. It takes multitasking to the next level. And considering the original Pikmin already excelled at encouraging and rewarding multitasking, that's a pretty big deal. It can be so satisfying to be off doing one task with Olimar, and then switch to Louie to accomplish something else on the other side of the map. It really helps to streamline a lot of processes in the game, and allows for an even greater level of strategy refinement than even the original. Of course, this element of gameplay is only beneficial if you know how to use it. You gotta know how to distribute your group of Pikmin between the two captains, and know which captain needs which Pikmin. It can be a difficult thing to utilize to its fullest potential, but when you finally get the hang of it, it's an incredible feeling. Speaking of the Pikmin, we have two new types in this game. The first new type are purple Pikmin, which are extremely heavy, which can be both a detriment and an advantage. Their weight makes them incredibly effective in combat. Chuck them at an enemy's head and watch them be flattened. And their weight also makes them incredibly strong apparently, as when carrying items, one purple Pikmin is the equivalent of 10 other Pikmin. As a trade-off, these guys are painfully slow, so while using them to carry items may seem like a better idea, as you'll need less of them, they're so slow that in some cases, it can be more beneficial to simply use more Pikmin to grab an item. And the second new type is the white Pikmin, who have the exact opposite strengths and weaknesses as the purple. They're incredibly light, meaning they're stupid fast, but that also means they're pretty bog standard in combat. Unless, of course, you want to sacrifice their bodies, as these guys are poisonous, meaning if an enemy eats them, they're donezo. White Pikmin can also find things that are hidden underground, which I assume has to do with their piercing red eyes. Handsome isn't necessarily a word I'd use for them, but I don't want to piss one of these guys off. The red, blue, and yellow Pikmin return from the first game, and function almost identically to how they did there, except for the fact that yellow Pikmin are no longer the only ones who can carry bomb rocks, which makes a lot more sense. The yellow Pikmin are also immune to a new hazard in this game, electricity. The elemental hazards play a much bigger role in this game, as all hazards have a corresponding Pikmin that is best equipped to deal with them, with the one exception of the purple Pikmin, who don't have any elemental advantages. Naturally, red Pikmin are still immune to fire, making them effective against the random ass plumes of flames that you'll come across every now and then. Blue Pikmin can't drown, white Pikmin can handle this poisonous powder, and the yellow Pikmin are immune to electricity, which is pretty nice, especially considering it insta-kills every other Pikmin type.
I better have an internet connection in this cave because I need to send Nintendo a strongly worded email.
Look, fine, okay. It makes sense for electricity to insta-kill Pikmin, but when it's the only hazard in the game that does that, it kinda starts to feel a little bit super fucking stupid. It kinda removes a lot of the strategy that the other hazards bring to the table, as they'll usually be accompanied by a non-elemental enemy. So you deal with, say, a fire hazard with your reds, and then have the rest of your squad take down the enemy. But with an insta-kill hazard, you have to make sure that the yellow Pikmin are the only ones on the scene. And by the time the hazard is taken care of, you then have to go back and retrieve the rest of your squad. It doesn't sound like a huge deal, but in execution, it doesn't feel great. There are also two power-ups in this game. The sprays that you can get from collecting enough red and purple berries. The red spray makes your Pikmin freakishly strong, and the purple one can turn enemies to stone briefly. These are both incredibly useful, and the fact that they're somewhat limited makes figuring out the exact right time to use them a blast. On our quest to make debt a thing of the past, we collect a lot of treasures, and pretty much all of them are real-world items, and I love this. Who the hell are you with your blatant product placement? You can't fool me. I have a sense for this kind of stuff, and would you look at that, they did it again! There's just something so charming about the Pikmin discovering a real-world item, especially if it's a brand you're familiar with. And then having the captains try and figure out what it is, having our ship come up with a name for them, god, it's great. It also helps give a much clearer perspective on the size of the Pikmin. In the original game, you could kinda get a feel for how effing puny they were, considering the fact that the leaves were huge comparatively, but it more felt like something where every now and then you'd go, oh yeah, they're tiny. And then just keep playing and forget again. But with this game, constantly having them compared to real-world objects continuously reinforces their complete and utter lack of size. And it's adorable. It takes 20 Pikmin to carry a Duracell battery.
Which means my Wii remote can store 40 Pikmin.
A good amount of these treasures are found on the overworld, which is standard Pikmin affair, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of treasures are found in the one single part of this game that sent shockwaves throughout the Pikmin fandom. The most love it or hate it element of the entire series. The caves.
Does this mean there's a legitimate chance of me being saved by Pikmin?
In all of the game's levels, we can find caves, which take us to completely new environments, which I very much appreciate considering the base levels in this game are the exact same ones from the first game. I get it, it's spring now, but the cherry blossom won't distract me from the fact that Awakening Wood is just the Forest of Hope again. The caves can have a lot of visual themes. Standard no-nonsense cave settings, caves with metallic floors, child train sets, above ground underground areas, because Pikmin 2 does not have a giveable shit about the concept of feasibility. The caves are broken up into a number of sub-levels, and 5 usually tends to be the sweet spot. On the final sub-level of most caves, there's a boss, and these are usually an enemy from the first game, or a variation of them, such as the burrowing Snagret. Almost every floor has at least one treasure for you to track down, as well as a load of enemies for you to take care of. The caves are where you find the flowers that allow you to turn red, blue, or yellow Pikmin into purple and white Pikmin, which can't be grown. Speaking of being unable to grow Pikmin, that's something you can't do when you're in caves. So if you lose Pikmin, when you lose Pikmin, you're straight out of luck, which kind of adds to the thrill of them. Also, time doesn't progress in the caves, meaning that if you enter one right at the beginning of the day, spend 3 hours in there and return to the surface, it'll still be the very beginning of the day. How fun. So, what's my overall take on the caves? They're fine.
Wouldn't recommend living in one, though.
At the end of the day, the caves just allow for more of that core Pikmin gameplay, so they can never really be considered a bad thing. But they do take up a bit too much of the playtime in my opinion. The fact that they're randomly generated is cool, and keeps things pretty fresh, but the vast majority of the game takes place in the caves, and it can get kinda tiring. Because of how thorough and careful you need to be, and also given the structure of the caves, spending the majority of the game in them means that Pikmin 2 is a long-ass game. Beating the game normally, which just means paying off all of the debt, can clock in at about 10 hours of gameplay, and going for 100% completion, which means collecting every single treasure, could probably double that. Especially if you've never played the game before, which, hey, guilty as charged. But despite all of its flaws, Pikmin 2 is still an absolutely fantastic game. I mean, it's the follow-up to Pikmin, one of the greatest games on the GameCube. How could it not be? Is it a flawless follow-up? God, no. But is it still a wicked fun adventure that's more than worth giving your time to? 1,000 times yes. If you like the first game, you are guaranteed to have an absolute blast with this one.
Considering all of this game's additions, successes, and failures, it's difficult to say whether or not I prefer this game to the original, but when directly comparing my own experiences with the two games, I think I do. I can totally see how this game's shortcomings could be deal breakers for some people, and to some extent, I'd actually argue that the first game is a more well-rounded experience. But damn it, man, I just enjoy that core Pikmin formula so much, so having a longer, more ambitious game to mess around with it in, it's perfect for me. Given how conflicting opinions can be on this game and how much I ended up enjoying it, I am very interested to see how this game's follow-up, which is universally praised, ends up stacking up against the two games that preceded it. If I ever get to not live in this cave, honest to God, not even this second piece of paper can make me feel any less miserable about being here. Wait a minute. I can go? I don't have to stay here anymore? Oh, finally!
Oh, the sunlight! How I've missed you! My lungs, they're filling with fresh air again! I'm free! I hate it!